because our next speaker is quite amazing. She's going to take us back 4,000 years to the Bronze Age, almost where we started this morning. Her name is Gina Luria Walker. She is a professor of women's studies at the New School in New York. And I have the pleasure not just in introducing her, but also in thanking her, because it is in collaborating with Gina that we decided to do today's conference all about the archaeology of textiles. So it's as much inspired by her theory and her thought as it is by all the other speakers. So good afternoon, Gina. Are you?
What I'm going to talk about are women textile workers from, as Philip said, 4,000 years ago. And we are reclaiming them because of their text. And so I'm going to talk today about Mummies, an invisible textile producer, women's work in the 19th century BCE, a very long time ago. Legions of textile workers have been invisible, literally invisible, for thousands of years. Now new translations of their surviving texts and information about their lives from these texts are enabling us to recover their central roles in global trade. From her cuneiform letters, and these cuneiform is a stone tablet, which is written on. From her cuneiform letters, we might imagine Mummies early in the morning, moving about in her home in Assur, the capital of the old Assyrian Empire, at the beginning of the 19th century BCE. And I'm going to apologize in advance again now, because I don't know how to pronounce either the Assyrian names or several of the Danish. Mummies checks the lunar, where she will weave with other women through the day. Her unmarried daughter Ahaha, who will soon be consecrated to God for protection, housemaids, and several female slaves. Then Mummies writes a letter of complaint to her husband and business partner, Pushkin, about his contradictory orders. As to the textiles about which you wrote me in the following words, they are too small, they are not good, she writes. Was it not on your own request that I reduced the size? And now you write again saying, process half a mina of wool more in your textiles. Well, I have done it. Mummies writes with authority. She owns property independently of her husband, collects her own, often large share of the business profits, and controls her own dowry. And these are the various shapes that that cuneiform can take. And this is a private letter to the right, because almost all of these are business letters, but some of them are also private. So here is where Mummies is. She's in Assur. She has her own responsibilities in the long-distance process of textile production and distribution, each with its own potential knots. She uses only the best sheep wool brought from the Hamrin Mountains southeast of Assur, an area well known for its sheep breeding. And I just want to take another minute to say that every piece of information that I'm using in my talk today emerges from the most assiduous, rigorous scholarship by people in the kinds of sheep, in the kinds of shearing, in the kinds of diets. I mean, it is amazing what the study of textiles is producing today. Sometimes acquiring the raw wool is difficult if fighting has been reported along the route or there is bad weather in the usual grazing lands. Once the wool is purchased, it must be spun on spindles into thread, then woven into intricate patterns of large-size cloth. Please note, ready-to-wear garments are not the custom. Next, the pieces must be finished or cleaned by the asglaikum, the washerman, usually a male specialist, and finally the completed textiles are transported by caravan to Pushkin, based in the city of Kanish in Anatolia, 600 miles away, a journey of 5 or 6 weeks by donkey caravan, where he will sell them for pieces of silver or perhaps tin or copper. So talk about long distance trade. Mamasi also replies to Pushkin's letter, in which he makes a special request. As for the textile made of wool from Sorbu, about which you wrote me as follows: send me a garment for me to wear. So he's asking for a custom-made costume. She replies, the garment has indeed been made, but is now with the washerman, so I have not yet sent it up to you. I will send it to you by a later donkey caravan, the textile made of wool from Serbu for you to wear. Mamasi's letters are part of an archive of 23,000 old Assyrian cuneiform tablets unearthed in merchants' houses at Kotepe, located in Central Asia. So this is an extraordinary discovery. These represent the oldest and largest collection of private archives in which women play significant parts as workers, executives, money lenders and borrowers, wives, mothers, daughters, and get back to it. Wives, mothers, and daughters and sisters. They process documents of the trade, like transport contracts. Sorry. And notifying messages and caravan accounts. The first of these cuneiform letters were discovered by random diggers. Systematic excavations began in 1948 and continue today. Teams of specialists in archaeology, archaeobotany, zoo archaeology, and archaeometry collaborate in processing the letters. Cecile Michel, can you see this now? A pioneering Assyriologist, has just published a collection of these letters in English translation after a decade of work translating them. It is called Women of Assur and Kanish, Texts from the Archives of Assyrian Merchants, and it's just out, and this is my copy, published in 2020. Only a small percentage of the tablets are by women, but they give us a first-hand glimpse into the busy lives of these women who played vital roles in the business of the time, in which thousands of textiles were produced each year and transported to be sold. One of the most significant findings is that some women seem to have written their own letters, and this is an astonishing find in the numbers in this group of cuneiform letters. Most of the letters from both men and women were composed by professional scribes, female we think as well as male. But the question of whether women could or should be literate, that is, taught to read and write in their own language, continued to be contested as late as the medieval period in the West. In many religions and many cultures around the world, it was simply considered unnecessary to train women's minds.
Sorry to interrupt, Gina. Could you just put the slide to the full screen again if you put play from current slide?
Yeah, that's it. Good.
Or you might want to go back to the map though.
Okay. Um,
Thank you.
oh, good.
Perfect, thanks.
Sorry. So this is the region where the 23,000 letters by women come from. And this is a Hittite woman and boy with spindle from Anatolia, which we take to legitimate the idea that weaving and textiles are primarily women's work. So whether women should be taught to read and write was a question for thousands of years. Yet the Assyrian letters and other findings confirm that women were able to read, classify, and write tablets. A legal document explicitly mentions a commercial tablet written down by a woman that apparently served as a technical manual for the textile trade. Some scholars believe that this, in effect, reverses the history of writing, which has long been thought to be the province only of men. In fact, the first human author-compiler, as they were known, for whom we have a name, a picture, and cuneiform texts, is Enheduanna, who was active in the 23rd century BCE, so even before Lamassi. Enheduanna, this is the disk of Enheduanna, which was found in the city of Sepur, now in present-day Iraq, in 1896. And here is a close-up. Enheduanna, daughter of the great and territorial king of Sargon, and you see that she cares very much about dress and her hat and her persona. Enheduanna's cuneiform texts include the startling one in which she dares to use the first person. She writes, I, Enheduanna, a form usually reserved for kings. A crater on Mars has just been named in her honor in 2015 because of the descriptions of stellar measurements and movements in her poems. This has produced great controversies over whether these are scientific, amid claims that she begins the tradition of women in science and technology. So when we discover texts by women, controversies always follow. Recent research reveals networks within the scribal tradition from Mesopotamia that recognized Enheduanna as an important author of influential religious texts, which continued to be copied by mostly male student scribes for centuries after her death. Evidence is also emerging of the presence of female scribes, as in the women's letters from Assur. What is crucial here is that we now have proof, more and more proof, that women were and always have been men's cognitive equals, that they could learn and write and discover. Assyrian merchants marketing the Assyrian products in Central Asia were able to judge, they thought, the quality of the textiles and sent back to women weavers technical advice that was not always welcome. Merchants' remarks about the textile qualities were sometimes quoted by the women while answering back, as in this letter sent by Lamasi to her husband. She writes, "Why do you write to me every time as follows? The textiles which you keep sending me are not good. Who is the man who lives in the house?" she asked, "and who is criticizing the textiles when they get to him?" She continues, "When you were still here, I gave to Assur Malik one heavy textile, and upon his return I gave him 4 other textiles. Why, though I repeatedly send textiles to you, do you claim that you have not received any? Send a message to me, saying if he did or did not bring the textiles to you, so that I know about it." So you can imagine the complexities of trade. Here are, and these were actually given to me some time ago by Agata Gilanowska, because these are excavated Bronze Age astragali polished bones that women used as loom-mates. And I believe, Agata, that I have this right, that when women are found far away from their places and countries of our origin, they nonetheless often have these little polished bones so that they can set up a loom with these loom weights so that they can weave to earn their daily bread. I think this is tremendously moving that even at that time there were portable technologies for women to live. Lamasi's letters, like those of the other women, reveal her responsibilities and concerns. She works from home, turning textile production into profit, while negotiating financial, distribution, and family situations. But even so long ago, gender distinctions apply. Assyriologist Cecile Michel advises the varied activities of women as housewives and weavers were never recognized as work. Lamasi and her female contemporaries are not included in the official accounts of textile evolution and production. And even in private letters, they are not referred to as weavers in the texts or as professional weavers as men were. Michel concludes, when producing textiles for Anatolia, women acted as true professionals. Indeed, their skills were recognized abroad, and they were paid for their work as weavers. With the money they earned, which built up their personal assets, independent of their husbands, they invested in trade and initiated financial operations, so that some of them were textile moguls. However, they are never mentioned as professional weavers. Perhaps we can see here the idea that work done at home is not considered a job, an idea later developed by the Greek thinker Xenophon. Michel refers to Economicus, Xenophon's work on household management, likely written much later than Lamasi, in 352 BCE. Xenophon was a Greek philosopher, student of Socrates, soldier, historian, and author of numerous practical treatises. He used the device of a discussion with a male friend about domestic economy to repeat a conversation with his new 15-year-old wife. Let me go to that. I'm sorry. I'm getting ahead of myself. Well, I should have had a picture of Xenophon in which he is very mature and very sober looking. The 15-year-old wife asks Xenophon about her role in their household organization and the management of the economy. She says to him, "How can I possibly help you? What power have I? All depends on you. My duty, as my mother told me, is to be discreet, and I will add that that means chaste and obedient." Xenophon replies, "It seems to me that God adapted woman's nature to indoor and man's to outdoor work. You must stay indoors and send out the servants whose work is outside and supervise those who work indoors. Receive what is brought in, give out what ought to be spent, plan ahead for what is to be stored, and ensure that provisions for the year are not used up in a month. Many of your duties will give you pleasure. For instance, if you teach spinning and weaving to a slave girl who did not know how to do this when you got to her, you double your usefulness to yourself." Xenophon goes on to explain to his wife that, like the queen bee, her job is to preside over the fabric's choicely woven cells within. She must look to it that warp and woof are wrought with speed and beauty. Xenophon treats his wife with respect and demonstrates that she is a willing student, but her responsibilities do not qualify as work equal to the professional occupations that men perform outside the home in the larger world. I would suggest that the misogyny that judges women's work as of lesser value in Mummies' time is perpetuated in Xenophon's culture and is still in force in many places today. Women created the material stuff of civilization. Every woman spun and wove. Slaves and maids produced the fabrics for daily life: sheets, towels, blankets, tunics, cloaks, and dresses for the household. Queens and princesses were entitled by their rank to create offerings for a goddess or patterns for their lives, using expensive threads dyed with hard-to-harvest berries or the shells of local mollusks into rich varieties of royal, Tyrian, or other shellfish purples, reds, and golds. And Philip has given us some purples from Oaxaca in Mexico. But in the several hundred years between the Trojan War, approximately the 7th century BCE, and the early Iron Age, accurate accounts of women's authority, autonomy, and institutional power in the world outside the home and in the textile trade were replaced with the narrative of women's work belonging only to the private domestic sphere. And we don't know why. Scholars haven't figured it out yet. The global project of feminist historical recovery is changing this and other misconceptions about earlier women with crucial evidence. We know now, for example, that ubiquitous loom rooms, where women sat together to weave in every culture, often provided them with training, companionship, and a place to speak safely about the misogyny that shaped their lives. We are learning about named women workers and their experiences as researchers find innovative ways to discover and, importantly, recover them. During the Bronze Age, women had careers as textile specialists. And the slides before are also given to me by Agatha, and these are her workshops in which women are working with spinning and spindles and knitting heddles. Textile historian E.J.W. Barber notes, not only do women clearly dominate the textile industry, but clearly also the textile industry dominates women and their lives. Archaeological and written evidence point to weaving in the earlier Bronze Age as primarily a female craft. Spinning was the most commonly seen gender signs for women in cuneiform cultures and often paralleled with weapons for men. In birth incantations, for example, baby boys were presented with axes and baby girls with pins and needles. Now, some of the most exciting work is being done in textile forensic archaeology, which adds additional weight to reversing misassumptions about earlier women's lives, particularly their geographical mobility and political and religious agency. Karen Fry, the first female research professor at the National Museum of Copenhagen, Denmark, and her team are reclaiming the lives of earlier women in dramatic ways. They are focusing for the first time ever on female mummies. Before the past few years in Karen's work, a mummy was a mummy, and it might be a daddy, but they are looking at female mummies through the use of new isotope and other scientific methods. Dr. Fry explains, these allow us to become very close to the people and the individuals themselves by investigating their remains directly. The multi-analytical studies of the Skydescript woman, for example, and this is the Skydescript woman, Bronze Age, 13th century BCE, found in Denmark, but from somewhere else, apparently quite far away. The studies of the Skydescript woman are the first to enable scientists to determine the age at which an exceptionally well-preserved prehistoric individual, that is, a young woman, probably about 18, migrated from another location. She goes on, from an archaeological standpoint, this one-time and one-way movement of an elite female during the age of marriageability suggests that she might have migrated with the aim of establishing an alliance between chiefdoms through a kind of marriage relationship. Still, there are also other possibilities that should be considered. Some scholars suggest that Bronze Age women played a bigger and central role also in network-related matters. Textiles preserved on female mummies also speak to their religious prominence in ritual activities. The burials of Bronze Age females, like the Skydescript woman and others, reveal that they were wearing the so-called short corded skirts, which were made of wool. And this is a sampling from the Skydescript woman. And this is picture Karen actually looking at what she's doing. And this is Karen sampling tooth enamel because the limestone preserved bones and teeth so very well. The short-corded skirts are seen on small bronze figurines also, and appear in rock art depicting what seems to have been ritual-related activities. And the Skydescript woman's large belt buckle probably has to do with Nordic Bronze Age rituals of worship of the sun god. Textiles really talk to us. Women's confidence at producing textiles paved the way for millennia of technical innovations, material art, and invention. Yet because weaving has been historically seen as women's work, only now is it receiving sustained and rigorous attention for what it reveals about textiles, textile production, and the interactions between resources, technology, and society. Scholars, designers, artists, and scientists are recovering forgotten technologies, previously lost fabrics, invisible individuals and groups of figures, and specifics, very crucially, of gender dynamics, as well as their more accurate context, that alter our understanding of the human past. Textiles are the common threads that link women and their working lives around the world. The more we learn about women's central role in the evolution of textiles, the more we can devise a feminist inflected fashion. Material creations that express women's primary contributions as workers, producers, inventors, magnates, collaborators, technicians, teachers, and importantly, unrecognized artists who continue to shape the physical world and adorn us with the work of their eyes and hands and minds. And now we're going to go to Philip's computer because on Monday, the Assyriologist, Michelle, sent me a teaser for a film that she has just produced. So do you do this, Philip, or do I?
It is on these tablets of clay where I have written my letters. From the start, the addressee and the sender are stated. These letters were sealed in envelopes of clay, and they traveled along with the merchandise on the back of a donkey between Mesopotamia and Anatolia.
Taham Kubi Ma ou Shimaat Ashur Ma Anakam Shailatim Bariatim ou Eteme Nu Sha'alma. Les archives de Kanech ont fourni un nombre assez conséquent de lettres de femmes. Et ces lettres de femmes sont souvent très intéressantes parce que, contrairement aux lettres d'hommes qui sont plutôt des lettres d'affaires, les lettres de femmes laissent passer aussi transparaître des sentiments.
You had told me that you had left bracelets and rings that I could sell to buy food, but I could not find them. When you left, not a single shekel of silver was left for me. You took everything from the house and left it empty. Since your departure, a terrible famine took over the city of Ashur, and you had not thought to leave even a litter of barley. Yet I still need to buy barley for our sustenance.
Şeyler, işaretler herhalde iyi. Dilciler şikayet etmez inşallah. Zarfı da gelebilir tabii. Ya şey de olmaz ya da zarflısı da gelebilir.
Thank you, Gina. It's just so remarkable how women's studies and archaeology and textiles all come together to rewrite women's history, and hopefully they'll get it right this time around.
But it's not just women's history. That's
Our history.
the one point I want to make. It's human history.
Yeah.
Because, of course, now we want to study the men. Why were they called professionals and not the women? And also for us to see how deep in the past are these, are the roots of misogyny that bedevil our lives even today. So thank you and apologies for my bad technical skills.
Not at all. Not at all. It was perfect.